let's look at another example. Okay, what I have here is something that looks like a yo-yo. I get a couple of strings which suspends this cylinder-shaped object. Okay, and at t equal to 0, I hold it at rest so that this thing is not moving. As I let go of it, it's going to go down. Okay, it's going to accelerate downwards as the string is being unwound. What I want to know is, as it goes down, what is the linear acceleration at the center of mass, which is right here. It's a uniform cylinder. Okay, so center of mass right here. And also, what is the angular acceleration of the cylinder rolling down? Also, suppose I start from rest at this position. By the time it descends a distance, call it L, or H, let's call it H. After the center of mass descends a distance H, how fast is the center of mass moving? Okay, so those are the things I look at. Now, if you want to find the angular acceleration and linear acceleration, you can use the same approach that we did for the previous problem. That is, you write down three things. You write down a formula that describes the center of mass motion. That's Newton's second law for the center of mass. You write down a torque theorem about a certain fixed axis or the center of mass. And thirdly, you write down the connection between ACM and alpha, right? Those are the three things we do. So you see, this problem looks different, but we're going to take the same approach. Now, first, let's look at the center of mass movement. To do so, let us figure out the force exerted on the center, the net force exerted on the cylinder. I have here, of course, the gravitational force, mg. I also have a tension. Actually, both have tension, but let's add them together. Let's say the total tension is T upwards. Okay, shooting downward is positive. I got mg minus T equals m ACM. That is the center of mass linear motion. Now, let's look at rotation about the center of mass or about a fixed axis. You know, you can figure out rotation about the center of mass. To do so, you don't have mg in your equation because there's no lever arm, but you have T in your equation, right? You're going to have to find out the torque provided by the tension T, but T is not known. We go back to the same old problem that we had for the previous problem. We can find T later, but it's not the best way to do it. What is the best way to do it? Well, how about if I choose point A? Okay, that is the contact point between the free part of the string and the part that still winds around it. Okay, you know, at this very moment from this picture, the whole cylinder is rotating about an axis that passed through point A, right? It's rotating about this axis, see? Okay, so this point A is not moving, right? Everything is rotating about it. So therefore, I can use the torque theorem about point A because it's a fixed point. Okay, that makes things a lot easier because what is the lever arm of the tension? 0, because these, both of these strings actually pass through that axis, so therefore they have no lever arm. Okay, the only force that does provide a torque about point A is what? Is mg. Okay, let's say the radius is r. So what is the lever arm? Line of action and the point. Distance is r. So the torque provided by mg about point A is just mg times r. And what is that equal to? That would be equal to I sub A times alpha. Okay, that is the equation about alpha. From that, you know alpha immediately. Thirdly, let us write down the connection between alpha and ACM, right? Linear motion, linear motion, rotation, and then you have the connection between the two. Again, the center of mass at this moment is doing a circular motion about point A with radius r, and therefore ACM is alpha r. Just like we did in the previous problem, except r at that time was L over 2. It's the same deal. All right. Again, I can solve for alpha directly from the second equation, and then I use that to find ACM. Once I get ACM, I can plug it in, I can find T. I can whatever I want. Okay. The only remaining thing is what is IA equal to? You know, if it's a disk, if it's a uniform cylinder or disk, it doesn't matter how thick it is from here to there. As long as it's uniform, if I rotate about its center of mass axis like this, okay, center of mass axis like this, I know the answer is 1/2 mr squared. Okay, the answer is 1/2 mr squared. Now, I must move this axis from here to there because I'm rotating about point A, not about the center of mass. How do I do that? Well, these two are parallel axes, right? So the answer here is ICM, which is 1/2 mr squared. What about the answer there? I must add another mr squared. R is the distance between the two axes, remember? So IA is equal to 1/2 mr squared. That's rotational inertia about the center of mass, plus another mr squared. That is 3/2 mr squared. Please be very careful. You are using point A as an observation point. You have to use IA, okay, about the same point. That's called self-consistency. All right, we now have IA. Let us find alpha. So what's alpha equal to? Alpha equals mgr over IA. mgr over IA from this formula. So it's mgr over 3 mr. So the answer is 2 G over 3R. That's alpha. Once you found alpha, you found ACM. What's ACM? ACM equals to 2 over 3 G. Again, you see this is less than 1 G. Why? Because if it were equal to 1 G, that means the tension would be removed. The whole thing will be just in free fall. The cylinder will be in free fall. Okay, now you only have 2/3 of G going down. Why? Because there is a 1/3 mg tension going up. As a matter of fact, you plug that in here. This side is 2/3 mg. This is mg, so tension must be equal to 1/3 mg. Again, this problem looks different from the one that we just discussed. You know, the stick, horizontal stick, but the method we follow is really just the same. Translational motion, rotation about a fixed axis, and then the connection between the two. All right, one last thing here. Let us figure out how fast the disk is rotating or the center of mass is moving as the center of the disk descends a distance h. How do we do that problem? Well, there are a couple of things you can do. Okay, you know ACM, and it happens to be a constant. Okay, it happens to be a constant. So as far as the center of mass is concerned, it is a uniformly accelerated motion, right? A uniformly accelerated motion, and we know it's not just so, it's a one-dimensional uniformly accelerated motion with an acceleration of ACM, and so we apply this well-known formula for one-dimensionally uniformly accelerated motion. You start from an initial position, you end up at a final position. The distance between them is h. Initial speed 0. You know the acceleration, which is uniform. Can you find the final speed? Yes, of course you can. You have, remember, v final squared minus v initial squared. Remember that formula? V final squared minus v initial squared equals 2a delta x. That's the generic formula. In our case, we're looking for v final. Okay, so v final, v initial is 0, equals 2 ACM times h. H is delta x from here to there. ACM is 2/3 G. So the answer here is 4/3 GH, and then that's VF squared. So what's the final speed of the center of mass? The final speed of the center of mass is the square root of 4/3 GH. From that, you can also figure out the angular speed of rotation at this moment. Okay, because this point here is the center of mass. And here's point A. Here's the center of mass. Okay, the center of mass goes down with this V final. That's linear velocity. This distance is R. So what is the angular speed? Omega. Omega times R gives you that linear speed, right? So omega final is V final over R. And that equals to 1/R square root of 4/3 GH. Okay, this method is really simple, and it's purely kinematic. Why can we get away with a kinematic solution without using the force and torque and all these things? Because we already know what ACM is from dynamics. So we're just borrowing that result. Okay, but it's also very instructive to look at this problem from conservation of energy point of view. You know, first of all, let's convince ourselves that energy is actually, mechanical energy of the cylinder is actually conserved. Let's go back to this picture. What does it take for energy to be conserved? Well, of course, the condition is that all the forces doing work on this cylinder must be conservative force. There are two forces here, mg and t. We know mg is a conservative force, no question about it. What about the tension T? In general, tension is not a conservative force. However, we're not going to worry about it. Why? Because tension is directly applied on this cylinder through point A or through this axis. But the cylinder is not moving. You know, the portion of the cylinder on that axis is not moving. Okay, so at the contact point, the speed of the cylinder is 0. So therefore, you know, even though the tension is not 0, the work done by the tension is 0. Okay? Therefore, we only have one force doing work, which is mg. And we can easily use conservation of energy then to figure out the answer. Let's look at the conservation of energy approach for this problem. I have two states, initial and final. Initial, final. Distance is h. The center of mass drops by distance h. How much potential energy is lost? mgh. You lost this potential energy. You must gain it back through kinetic energy. Okay, here's the way to calculate the kinetic energy. That's the thing you want to be careful about. In principle, when the cylinder is rotating about point A here, this is the center of mass, okay, about point A, right? The whole thing is rotating about point A. There are two types of kinetic energies involved. One is the rotational kinetic energy because the thing is rotating. Another thing is the center of mass is also moving, so it's got translational kinetic energy. How should I combine them? Well, there are generally two ways to do it. One is, if I know for sure that there is a fixed axis of rotation for that object, which does not always happen to be true. I mean, it's possible that the entire disk is moving in such a way that no point on that disk is stationary. Here, though, point A is stationary for this moment. Therefore, you can consider, if you use point A to be the observation point, point A itself is not moving. There's no translational kinetic energy. You can think of the entire kinetic energy as the kinetic energy of rotation about point A. Okay, so that tells us 1/2 IA omega squared. All right, there we go. What is that equal to? 1/2 IA is, as you know, 3/2 mr squared. And you have omega squared. This immediately tells you what omega is. Omega is the square root of, first of all, you got 1/r here. And then you have mgh, m and m cancels, 3/4 gh. That is the same result as we got before. But the concept is different. Here we use conservation of energy to do it. Another thing is, you can always conceptually break down the kinetic energy of a rotational object into two parts, using the center of mass as a reference. Okay, you say the kinetic energy has two parts to it, translational kinetic energy and rotational kinetic energy. How do you break it down? Well, it turns out you must use the center of mass as a reference line. For the center of mass, you have 1/2 m v cm squared, that's for sure. And secondly, you have the rotation about the center of mass, 1/2 ICM omega squared. Okay, that is how you break down kinetic energy of rotation and translation of motion. You must use the center of mass to break it down. If you use any point, say point B here, it turns out, yeah, you can break it down to rotational motion about point B and kinetic energy for translation motion about point B, but the nasty thing is there will be a cross term of VB times omega. You don't want to mess with that. Okay, why is it for the center of mass the cross term VCM times omega vanishes? I didn't prove it, but I can tell you it can be proven. Please use VCM equals omega r, plug it in and see if you get the same result. You definitely should. Please try that yourself.